Welcome to Progenesis Academy webinar. Since last year, we've had 46 webinars so far. If this is your first time attending, then you would want to check on our previous webinars on progenesis.com/academy. You can also see them on our YouTube channel, Progenesis Academy. Today is CAP inspection. It's a very important topic, as all you know. We have a great panel of lab directors who will be helping us navigate through CAP requirements. And we're going to introduce the speakers. So we have with us Bill Vinier. He is a lab director at San Diego Fertility and Center and co-founder at West. And we have Kim Pomeroy. He's the lab director at the World Egg Bank. We have Bhushan Gonggrade. He's the lab director at Care for Reproductive Medicine. And we have Tony Anderson. He's the lab director and founder at embryodirector.com. Thank you so much for joining us. And our first speaker is Bill.
Thanks, Nabil, and the whole Progenesis crew for putting this together. Always enjoy doing these things, especially with the colleagues you have on the panel today. So I'll just get right to it. My first few slides, I'm not going to spend too much time on. I'll kind of give you some points about it, how to prepare for a CAP inspection. All right, so there's 5 checklists that, at least for my lab, we do endocrine and andrology. So the number in the brackets are how many questions in each packet or checklist. The one main point I want to make about that is there's a lot of redundancy in some of these questions. So your procedures and protocols are probably going to cover more than one question from these checklists. So what's being assessed? These are the main points. There's branches out of here. The main thing about procedures is they're not checking if your procedure matches what they expect or how they do things, since this is kind of a peer review type thing. So you have other lab directors or people come in that do the same thing you do for the most part. There are other inspectors that come from like a hospital-based or a big lab-based thing. So I kind of train them when they're with me to not think of a big hospital or big corporate lab. It's more of a small clinic, and we focus on embryology and IVF. So they're not really grading procedures. They're just making sure what's written in your procedures is being done on the bench. Of course, why do we need to be inspected? Patient protection, staff safety, these types of things. You know, are we following laws and regulations? Are we giving and providing, you know, an acceptable service? So here's how we prepare at SDFC. And nowadays, I'll kind of revert back to the beginning for me as well. But you have to be organized. That's the main thing. Whether you're doing it digitally or you have binders, make sure it's just all easily accessible. It is easy to find where your answers are essentially to those checklist questions. This isn't just on myself, it's on my entire team. We usually have teams of 2 every year. So even in the non-inspection year, we have to do a self-inspection. So I have, you know, 2 people on, and that changes yearly. And I know there's other labs that hand different checklists to different members of the staff to go through and make sure everything is A-OK. simplify. Do not get into too much detail in your policies and procedures. Because if you tweak one thing from there, then you have to go back and tweak a lot in your policies and procedures and find out. Let's just say, hey, I used to use Irvine Scientific and CryoLock, and I switched to Kitazato and CryoTop. Well, in your policies and procedures, just say you use commercially provided devices and media instead of kind of pinpointing to that. It's no surprise to us, and it's announced, so you have plenty of time to get ready for this. My main thing, and I might say it more than once, don't be afraid of this. This is a learning thing for our clinic, as well as the people that are inspecting us. So they learn a lot from us, we learn a lot from them. Oh, that went too far. Riley, how do I go back? There we go, thanks, appreciate it. So here's just a clip of what I provide the inspector. So on the left-hand column is the checklist question. So you can see COM is for common, RLM is for reproductive lab. And then where is it located? So I have the question and I match it to where it's located. So it's easy for them to find our answers or our policies and procedures to that certain checklist question. So this should be very helpful for them. And in our policies and procedures, this is just like chain of custody type thing. If you look at D in this little clipping, I have exactly what it addresses in those checklists. So again, trying to be as helpful and as organized as possible to get the inspectors through this. That's not to say I'm not going to get discrepancies or anything like that, or deficiencies. I usually do. They're usually a low number, and it's usually from something revised or something new, but we try to keep up with those things. As far as an initial CAP inspection for a new lab or new team members, always use CAP kind of as a go-to to find out as much information as you can on your initial inspection and what to expect. There's apps out there now besides CAP, but there's Art Compass, who has the checklists on their app, which is very helpful to go through and find out a lot about what your inspection is going to be about. A consultant. So early on in my directorship of the IVF lab, is we pulled in every 2 years, we would pull in a lab director from around the country, and someone that I usually knew, to come in and not necessarily do a CAP inspection, but just go through our lab, see how our daily day-to-day activity was, just for a day. So they're not going through the CAP questionnaires with us or anything like that, but they're just kind of analyzing how we do things and how we can improve or change something to make it easier or something along those lines. Right, so what to expect? Again, this is a peer review type thing. It's helpful for both of us. I learn a lot when I do inspect a lab, and I learn a lot when someone comes and inspects mine. Again, have accessibility to your lab and your staff. So don't get your staff worked up like, oh my gosh, this is critical, we're gonna get shut down. Turn the other way, hide, whatever. No, get them involved. They're going to learn a lot from this. So, so that's the three main things is just, don't get overwhelmed by the number of checklists or questions. There's a lot of redundancy in there. Don't be afraid. Okay, this is good and helpful. And three, you know, don't, there's simplify things. Don't get too involved with your policies and procedures. So when you change something simple, you have to change your whole policy and procedure. So kind of, I don't want to really use the word dumb it down, but keep it very vague and simple as possible. I think that's my final slide. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've learned over about 30 years from others inspecting my lab and me inspecting others. And these guidelines not only apply to CAP, but you can also apply some of these to the Joint Commission inspections or an FDA inspector. First of all, I think you have to have a good personal constitution. And above all, you need to be honest. At all costs, you need to insist on honesty from yourself and from those you work with. You also need to to let those you work with, especially your superiors, the owners of the clinic, that you're going to be honest. You will not lie and cover up for yourself or for others. This includes past clinic mistakes or decisions made by your superiors. When asked by an inspector, you'll be candid and truthful. Your supervisors and the owners should know well ahead of time that you'll not lie for either of them. If a doctor transfers a wrong embryo, or he asks you to transfer embryos with donor ova that are clearly not eligible, your solution to these things should be transparency and willingness to face the music, whether with the clinic you work with or with the regulatory groups that we have to follow. An important part of this honesty is you need to be able to cover your rear. I have CYA, that should be CYR, sorry. You need to keep a paper trail. I do this the best by using emails. And I state my position in an email whenever I'm asked to do anything that I feel is controversial or might come back to bite me later. And I keep all my emails. I make sure I express my concerns in writing. No one's going to remember what you said when it matters, including even maybe yourself. If you don't understand what should be done, if the situation is really complex, and maybe it's made complex because of regulatory language, you should clearly define in an email how you feel. You never want to become the scapegoat. For example, an embryologist at a hospital clinic in Louisiana found himself as the cause of all of the tissue labeling problems of an FDA inspection. He lost his job, his reputation, was subjected to humiliation and lawsuits at a hospital where that same IVF clinic had several medical directors and many laboratory directors in a short period of time. It was at a hospital that even had several other prior problems with the FDA, even outside of the IVF clinic. So that means when you come into a new clinic, you want to make sure you're not setting yourself up. If you find anything irregular, you need to bring this to the attention of any supervisors in an email. The third thing you need is knowledge. If you have responsibility in an area that's open to interpretation, insist on you becoming the expert. That means, as boring as it may be, you need to attend conferences and take part in those conferences to become an expert. Don't depend purely on another's interpretation or knowledge. I've seen this fail too many times. Read and understand the source documents. Seek out a consensus among your colleagues at the least. Never trust someone's opinion on its own. I remember a doctor tried to convince me that a medical questionnaire was good because the person that wrote it was knowledgeable and that the last inspector let it go. But that medical questionnaire was not appropriate for the FDA. Now I want to show you, this is an image of how you should have your inspector's office look when he comes in. You want him to have a place that is not much more than a cage with just the bare minimum. You want him or her to have a desk, a pen, and paper, and any books or paper that you feed them through that little latch in the middle of that cell. And I'm not saying this to be mean, but you have to think about this. And with CAP, it's a little bit different in that it's not as adversarial as it is with the FDA. But I have met adversarial CAP inspectors, and you need to prepare for it. There should be no computer in there, no phone, and you will supply the records the inspector asks for. You sequester the inspector in a room, and you feed him like a shark. You only offer him small pieces of meat when he's hungry. When he asks for something, you feed it to him a little at a time. Now, there are some cases where you might give a whole binder of material over him, but that's usually the exception unless it contains only the information he needs. For example, if they need the records for this last year, I would not give them the records for the year prior. Whenever you give the inspector any information, I always check it outside of that room to make sure that I can't find any errors in it. You don't want to go in and hand him a file and then find an error and then try to handle it. You should have examined any data anyway. Never upset an inspector. Be on time and say yes to everything. You can say yes and then add a but at the end. You can say, well, can you bring me this? And you can say, yes, I'd be glad to, but I'm not sure that it applies to this situation. You need to make sure that they don't see any fear or confusion in you. You need to convince them that this is your domain. You know where all of this information is that they need. I would also say limit who is in the office where you are doing the inspection. I had one instance where we were doing an FDA inspection, and all of a sudden, one of the physicians came up to the FDA inspector and said, you know what, these regulations don't make sense, and then started explaining something that didn't make sense to him. Immediately, we had an announcement overhead that said, doctor, please come to your office. So you want to make sure that you limit who these people talk to. Now, let me go to the next one here. I discuss a little bit of what I call CAP hell, and these are some inspectors that are very difficult to deal with sometimes. The one that is really looking for dirty hidden secrets. The one that is there that doesn't even understand the regulations or that wants to impose what they do on what you are doing. Also, I would never have an inspector that's associated with a competitor. I don't think that's a wise decision ever. I know one person that allowed that to happen and they paid the cost for it. And then there are some CAP inspectors that have other priorities. There was one CAP inspector whose priority was obviously being there on a vacation, meeting with the family, and playing at the beach. When you have these issues, I would never confront an inspector. This is something that you can later go on and put in a letter, if you want, to the office of CAP. I want to say one thing that I think is important, and that is that if your inspector does not find a deficiency, he is doing you and all of us a disservice. There was a Government Accountability Office report in 2006 that looked at CAP inspections and found that because colleagues are the ones that were inspecting, they seldom found any deficiency. And that deficiencies found in 1 year were often repeated the next time they had an inspection. Because of that, there were changes made to CAP, such as they tried unannounced inspections and the addition of a specialist team member. And this was because of this Gao report. You really should not look upon having a deficiency as your clinic or you doing something wrong. You should appreciate it as a way of improving, and you should accept deficiencies as a chance to make those improvements. Well, oftentimes you might find a problem with the CAP inspection. Maybe it's one of the questions is misinterpreted incorrectly by the CAP inspector. I would not bring that up to the CAP inspector except in a very polite way. And after that, I would leave it. And afterwards, you can write about it in your report explaining the deficiencies that you received. And I know in most cases, if it is a problem with the interpretation, the decision will be found that maybe it was just interpretation and that really there was no deficiency. My one big advice is as you go through the inspection, look at it as a learning opportunity. Whatever happens, try to enjoy it. And if you can, always fix an issue before the inspector starts filling out deviation reports. They will usually tell you, or you will know what the issue is. And if you can fix it with a form or a protocol change, do it right then and there. The other thing I like to tell people is I would not have a book with deviations in them available. They're not necessary for CAP, but I would have them in case the inspector finds something that went wrong. Then you can pull out that part from your deviation book and show them that you were aware of it and you fixed it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, our next speaker is Dr. Anderson. Tony, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nabil. So it's a pleasure to be here today. We've had a lot of great speakers, and going last, I'm always afraid there's going to be some redundant stuff. But I really loved how Dr. Pomeroy pointed out that sequester them in the room and feed them like sharks. And if we've all had that hell cap inspection, was my first one. So. Everyone after the first one's been okay, but I always say getting an inspection is a little bit like having a root canal and a high colonic on the same day. But the idea is to always be prepared, and I'm going to. Okay, so there's a couple essential things we need. I think everybody's alluded to here. There's three basic protocol manuals that I have: the laboratory SOPs, the lab safety, the quality control and quality management I have in one manual. And then I basically have a binder that I have all the supporting documentation on that. And something that everybody looks at is competency and the proficiency testing. And those are the basic nuts and bolts of what we have in those checklists that we've all mentioned today. Well, can you forward it, Riley? One of the things I always come across when I go to CAP inspections, and being a multi-site lab director, I end up doing quite a few a year and getting quite a few done. Also go through CLIA, and I always find CLIA very educational. The CLIA inspectors, this is what they do for a living, and they are very helpful. It's interesting how many times I'll go to a laboratory and I'll find that the laboratory supervisor is the one doing the inspections and not the lab director. As a lab director, I always thought it was my responsibility to do that. And so when I see that, I always wonder if the lab supervisor is doing the inspection when you're getting inspected, does that same person go out and do the inspections at another lab for the reciprocation? Like if you get inspected, you have to do an inspection. And so, whose responsibility is it anyway? One of the things I really hate is going into a lab inspection. I tried to imitate what I do. I went into a lab inspection one time where, and they weren't feeding me like a shark. They just inundated me with data and boxes of paperwork and binders after binders. It was a conference room that would probably hold like 16 people in, so say a 20 by 10 room, and there was binders all around three walls of that room, and some things on carts, and it was just overwhelming the amount of information I went through, and try to go through that in a day. It's kind of like trying to find out if someone's guilty or innocent in a big legal thing, and you're just inundated with information. And we'll go to the next slide. And I've had lots of binders, and this is what a CAP inspector will typically come into when they come to my lab. They'll find those three binders, three manuals: SOP manual for the IVF lab, the quality management, quality control, and then lab safety. And then just basically one binder with all the supporting documentation. You only have to keep that documentation for 2 years as far as your quality control information. So after 2 years, you can remove that from your binder, and you can either store it if you want, but under the guidelines, you can actually remove it. So my idea is just to keep it simple. I think Bill also mentioned that. So go to the next slide. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the problems, deficiencies I've had over the years, and some of them are continuous. But one of the things I've never had, the reproductive laboratory checklist for the SOP manual, like what you do in the IVF lab, is always the easiest one. It's very straightforward. Do you have this, and does this have it in your SOP? And does your paperwork confirm that? I've never had a deficiency in that. Where you do have a lot of deficiencies is quality management. And to really have a good quality management program, it's good to have an EMR. And if you don't have an EMR, or if you do have an EMR, does that fit your quality management protocol? And a lot of times, the EMRs that you have are very limited on the data you can get out. And if you want to get more data out, it usually costs money to do that. So you really have to then turn and retrofit your quality management program to meet what you can get out of your EMR. What I find is that where it doesn't fit the needs that we're looking for, we end up having to create new spreadsheets to collect that data. The next most common one, which used to be my most common deficiency, is the personnel. Like early on, you could use your annual review, which was their annual competency assessment, and so when they came in, it took me forever to figure out what they were looking for in evaluation of competency. But the Department of Health specifically spells it out, and I'll show it to you here in a minute. But it took me several years, several inspections to get that right. And the CAP inspector would say one thing, the CLIA inspector would say another thing. And it finally came down to me when I was working with the Cleveland University Hospital program, that I went through basically 5 CAP inspections when I was consulting with that program, and probably 3 CLIA inspections. And basically I got the personnel competency evaluation basically from CAP and implemented that into my system. One of the things I always tend to forget, and it's just really an oversight, is the first time you have someone hired, you have to do 2 the first year. And that's one of the things that I've missed, and an inspector will find that. And what we find is that a lot of inspectors, they'll come in and look for the things that they've been cited for. But these are things that I know, and I do look for those things when I do inspections. And then after that, really every year you have to do that. And we're going to look at what a competency assessment looks like. Another one that I've had is fire drills. I used to just do the laboratory because that's what was required. And then I got a deficiency because I didn't do the whole office. So, now if I'm actually helping a lab prepare for a CAP inspection or doing a CAP inspection, I will I'll do that. I will, make sure that they're prepared for that. And then, chemical hygiene plan is something that I actually had in my lab safety manual, but it was spread throughout. And I had a CAP inspector that, just because they didn't like how it looked, I ended up getting that and having to do that, redo that and basically compile it together and all together. And something I've done to simplify my CAP requirement is I actually do the SDS online. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that I use digitally to keep things simple. And part of that is just when I have the SDS online, I can put that on any computer and I can search that. So it's a very nice system to have and not very expensive. But these are the 6 areas of competency evaluation. You have to do a direct observation of routine patient test performance, monitoring, recording, and reporting of those results, direct observation, and in its application proficiency testing and problem solving. So what you have to be careful of, you can just get overwhelmed with competency evaluations. You don't have to do competency evaluations on dish prep. But those things where you're reporting and testing results, where you have to do some problem solving, maybe some damage control. And a real good way to look at it is, where are you doing proficiency testing? and look at that and look at those areas. That's where you need to set your competency assessments for, because we do so many things in the IVF lab. If you're simply doing andrology, then you only have one competency assessment. But most of us do, andrology and endocrinology and retrievals and transfers and embryo checks and those kinds of things. So there's multiple competency assessments along the way, and I feel I finally figured that out, and it's going well. Let's go to the next slide. One of the best things I would say that I've added into the laboratory is the Reflections app. It's a web-based application that you can use for all your quality control, and you basically takes a little bit of setup, and it's not very hard to set up. You can, it costs about $900 a year, but I have all my quality control online for all the labs: endocrine, andrology, embryology, 15 incubators, multiple tanks. And so the nice thing about this is that you can actually digitally sign it. I've been through CLIA inspections, FDA, CAP inspections. I've even been through New York New York inspection, because we are tissue bank licensed here. And so I was a little nervous about using some of these digital applications, and Reflections was one of the first things I used, and I like it a lot, and I use that all the time. I actually use it in all my labs. One of the nice things is, you can't see here, you can see up here in the right corner that the San Antonio lab, when I was offsite directing our Dallas lab as well as Austin, I can look at those and I can see where things are done or not. One of the nice things I really like about this is that a lot of times when I go to prepare for a CAP inspection, I'll look through the QCs, even though my supervisor may be signing off on them, or if I'm signing off on them, I may not get to those right away. Whereas these, if a QC isn't done in that day, it will send an email. You can have it sent to you, you can have it sent to your CEO, you can have it sent to anyone you want. But it lets you know that quality was out of range and it was not put back into range. So it's one of the real things I love about quality control, and an inspector will look at that. Go to the next slide. You can kind of get to see what a report looks like. This is one of our tanks. You can see each week when we're doing our measurements, the ups and downs of it. And one of the nice things about this is, if you're just looking at a measurement on a spreadsheet, or even just on a form that you're filling out, you're not going to recognize some of the ebbs and flows of this. You could get a sign where things are, each week, maybe you're getting a little more evaporation. You'll start to see that line decline down, and actually identify a tank that's failing earlier on by looking at these graphs. And so it's one of the cool things about using this, if you go back and look at some of the reports from that. So go to the next slide. So this is an application that I'm not currently using, but I was introduced to it when I was working in the Cleveland lab. It's called Media Lab, and maybe there's some people familiar with this. I hadn't used this before, but going through multiple CAP inspections and CLIA inspections, I can't take any credit for it. The team there basically set it up. The SOP manuals, if you went to go look for a question in that application, it will take you directly to the SOP that is there. Very much like how Bill had a spreadsheet to show you where the question is, and then it could tell you where this is. But this is actually a great way for document control, because if there's a change in that SOP, it'll send a message to all the staff members that are required to review that SOP, and they have to then check that SOP, sign off that they read it, and they're confirmed that they are implementing that. So it's a great software that prior, just setting up for this talk, I looked at what the cost of that is, and it was around $600 for just for the Media Lab portion. The document control is a little bit more, but for up to 5 labs, so up to 5 CLIA accounts. So really not terribly expensive to always be prepared, especially if you're doing multiple labs. It's probably a great tool to use, and I'll probably look into using it. Go to the next slide. Another app I think Bill referred to is the Art Compass. And full disclosure, I actually am on the scientific advisory board for this app. But what's kind of cool with this is one of the things we don't realize, most of us don't realize, is that none of the proficiency tests, none of the tests that we do, they're not regulated by CLIA. And so they're not regulated assays. An embryo transfer is not a regulated assay. Embryo assessments aren't regulated assays. And so you could actually, there's a question in the CAP checklist, do you have a system for unregulated assays? And a lot of us think of this as an alternative and an addition to what we do with our proficiency testing. But one of the things that this has actually saved me on is where I had a deficiency because something was out of range. I was getting ready to get a deficiency because one of my proficiency tests was out of range on embryo assessment. And really, the embryo assessments through, say, ABB, it's you either get it right or you get it wrong. It's a 50% or 100%, or I suppose it could be 0%. So, this was a way to use as an alternative test, to go back and actually do with this. And I like to use this for intertech variation with my staff. There's another thing you can do. You can actually upload the documents, and we'll go to the next slide. You can go to the upload documents, and you can have basically a whole personnel file. That's one of the things that you have a bunch of binders. Go to the next slide, Riley. You have a bunch of binders. You can see up in the top left corner, you can actually upload. I have basically 5 things in my personnel folders. I have their CV, their job description. I have their their training records, and then also their personnel competency evaluation. So you put all of this in the one app. And what's kind of cool with this is that as a technician, if lab directors are using it, they could just that's kind of their portfolio they could take with them. One of the recent things I think also Bill mentioned is that there is the CAP checklist on there. I think someone was asking where can you get the CAP checklist. It's on here, and you can basically put on there where it is in the SOP, very much like how Bill had in his spreadsheet, and then the procedures where you're going to use those and what pages those are on. So these are on the Compass app, and they're there for use. So go to the next slide. So I want to thank everybody for being here today, and thank you for the opportunity, Nabil.
Thank you so much.
One of the things I would add that Kim pointed out is that if you don't get any deficiencies, that inspector didn't do you any justice. And I always, when you're doing inspections, it's always surprised how many people, they want a 0 deficiency inspection. And getting a deficiency isn't a bad thing. When I get a deficiency, I'm like, yeah, I missed that. That's right. Thank you for that. And I'll fix that.
So what I would like to talk about is software like Media Lab. So we know that not too many clinics are using a software-based solution. And I personally use Media Lab for my compliance as a laboratory. It has been the best thing that happens to me because I could track any document in real time. If I edit one document, it's going to be only one. There is a filing system in it. It's beautiful. But when I speak to other lab directors, some of them friends of mine, about their control system, document control system, many don't have one. They just use folders and files. And so why you guys think this is the case, given IVF is highly regulated and there's a lot of documentation of all kind that is involved in the process? And I'll start with you, Kim.
It's interesting you bring up Media Lab because I just went through one of their presentations about 2 weeks ago, and I thought it was an amazing piece of software. But I think that is a weak point. Oftentimes we think that saving versions is a good document control. and that may have been good 10 or 20 years ago, but I find it totally inadequate right now. There are the versions. First of all, if it's Word and you're saving versions within their version method, it doesn't work very well. In fact, I think they took it out of Word because they're having so many issues with their version function in Word. So the only way you can do it now, if you're not using one of these methods, is to do it manually. And that's, to me, that's very hard to do. It's what I still do, but I'm looking forward to getting Media Lab for at least for document control and probably the module for preparation for inspections too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Let's ask Bill. What do you think, Bill? Do you use any software system for document control?
No. So that's again, I'm glad Tony brought that up, and it seems real interesting. And now that you and Kim also kind of referred to it, I'm definitely going to look into it, because if you want to see document out of control, come to my lab, because our storage inventory binders are ridiculous. They take up a whole room themselves. So I need something. So this is definitely good to know. So I don't have a great document control right now. Again, after 2 years, it goes to storage. So
okay.
And that's just using a company and sitting in a warehouse, and I just need to request it if I need to, and that's about it. That's my quality, my document control, I guess.
Thank you so much. Yes, Kim, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, no one should feel bad about this, because I've been looking for the last 10 years for a good document control program that would meet our needs. And I could not find a small program. All I could find were these programs that cost $20,000 and $30,000 until I found this program that's made it affordable for all of us.
Thank you so much. Bushan, what's your use of software in your organization?
Exactly what Bill mentioned, we are also very primitive paper right now. Heard about this one, but haven't had the opportunity to use it. Go now.
Very good. Let's get the poll results. I think we've asked the audience a few questions related to these presentations, and let's see what the poll says. Thanks so much, Riley. So our question to the audience was: do you have any support to prepare for CAP, such as dedicated staff, corporate support tools, systems, softwares, etc.? 49% said yes. 43% said somehow, and 9% did not have support. And then we asked them, what aspect of CAP preparation do you prioritize? And this is a multi-choice question. So procedures were 31%, personnel 29%, and equipment 20%, safety 26%, quality control, quality assurance 40%, quality management 26%. So it looks like it's evenly distributed. Then we asked, how long does it take your lab to get ready for a copy inspection? 14% said they are always ready, 6% 1 week, and 26% 1 month, 23% 3 months. So that's how long it takes an IVF center or a lab to get ready for an inspection. Then would you rather have CAP or CLIA? And I think one of your guys did talk about CAP and CLIA, this distinction. So 54% would rather prefer CAP than CLIA. Then we asked, how many deficiencies did you get in your last CAP inspection? 31% no deficiency, 11% 1, 23% 2, 14% more than 2, and the rest were unsure. Then we asked, which of the following deficiency did you get? Use of expired reagents, 6%, improper instrument maintenance, 6%, patient identification and double witnessing 3%, but the majority were scoring for others. I would be interested to know what that others mean. What do you guys think about the poll? And I'll start with you, Tony. Tony, I think your mic is not operating, so let's move to maybe I'll go to Bill. What do you think about the poll?
Yeah. No, yeah, it's pretty diverse. I would expect it to be diverse like that. Yeah, Tony's back. I think he was frozen there for a second, frozen in time. Yeah, I mean, there's difference, and you have an array of different CAP inspectors, so they're looking at different things. And I think someone alluded to it, maybe Tony or Kim, that they look at stuff that they got dinged on. So that's stuff they're going to try to look for in those types of things. So yeah, I would expect that the poll to be pretty diverse like that.
Very good. How about you, Kim? What's your feedback on the poll?
I think it's what I expected too. Yeah. It's spread out pretty wide. I think, showing that half people feel like they're supported to perform the functions for the CAP, to meet CAP regulations, and half don't feel they are. I think that's interesting. I would have liked to see something about space or about the number of hours the embryologists work, because I've seen this come up many times in a CAP inspection, only to find that the next time the lab's inspected, it has the same deficiency: too much work, not enough embryologists, or too small of space. And it doesn't seem to get changed.
Very good. Thank you so much. Tony, what's your feedback on the poll?
One of the things actually why I like CLIA inspections, I don't like any inspection, but the CLIA inspections, the CAP inspections are supposed to be peer reviewed and educational, but it's really kind of like, well, this is what I got dinged on, so I'm going to ding you on it too. And it doesn't, like, there's really no learning in it. Yeah, even though they don't have any oversight of embryo labs, they really only look at andrology. That's right, CLIA. But I actually learn a lot, and so I'm fortunate enough to have an inspector here in San Antonio. I can actually call him up. I was moving my Roche machine for this new lab. I called him up, like, what do I need to make sure that this is giving the right results? And they're actually very helpful. And so, like, I would say, don't be afraid to call these guys. But like Kim said, everything else is evenly distributed. The CAP inspection list, you're right, the space, the volume. But, one of the time I went to a CAP inspection, and, one of the questions is, do you have power backup? And they did. It was one of those little tiny batteries that you would put on your computer, a UPS, but that was supposed to run the whole entire lab. But technically, they did have it, but it was insufficient. I'm pretty sure the next inspector had the same. It was make it a deficiency, but so I don't really know. Like, it probably needs to be looked at again a little more closely.
Very good. BK, what's your feedback?
Well, very similar. I mean, the CAP inspectors are biologists, professionals in this field. But at the same time, none of us are professional inspectors like us or other. So there's a lot of inspector to inspector variation in how you understand or how hard or how soft you want to be. So it's varied. It's really depends on the inspector, what they are citing. Just like somebody they have been dinged themselves, they will probably going to ding you again on something similar. So we have had personally very different sometimes some of the checklist questions, some people take it really literally and do not want to get from that, even though it might be a better option. We have had a issue when we have alarm system that gives us 24-hour continuous monitoring. We've got a lower threshold temperature and the upper threshold rather. So if liquid temperature goes above a certain level, it calls us immediately. And despite that, there was a checklist question that annual measurement of, I think it was, I don't know if it is a new version, it is there, but a few years ago. And inspector did not consider that as a better option, that you have a continuous 24-hour monitoring. They required regular monitoring by putting a yardstick into that. I did have to, and we got a deficiency on that one. We did have to contest that, and ultimately CAP did understand what we had to supply graph, 24 hours or 7 days or month graph, that anytime temperature drops, we get it.
Very good.
So yeah, there are better systems, but some of the checklists, somebody takes it literally. I don't know what is that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's move to some of the questions that were asked live. And I will start my first question. I think I saw her earlier. Yes, Lisa Nelson, my friend. So she asks, does processing sperm only for IVF count as semen analysis if we do sperm count and motility? And what if we release those numbers to the patient? Bill?
That's a great question, Lisa. I'm going to be honest with you. We don't do a count or motility at IVF. We give it a excellent, good, fair, poor grade. So I don't know how that would be. If I was inspecting, I would take it as you're not doing a semen analysis. You are just, getting a basic sperm count and motility just before your sperm prep type thing. So I guess it would be up to who's inspecting you. And if you did get dinged on it, I would assume you could probably win a challenge on that. But we took it totally out. Count, motility and stuff. We just kind of give it a basic grade and how we washed it or whatever, whether we used a gradient, a Zymo, or just washed it. So we don't get too much into detail in the IVF lab anymore.
Thank you so much. If someone wanted to answer the same question, I can take that. Otherwise, I can move to the next question. Yes, Kim?
I actually asked the commissioner for the Reproductive Laboratory Accreditation Program for CAP this question, Erica Benke. And Erica told me that her opinion is once you count, you're doing a diagnostic test. I know that there are some clinics that they avoid having someone that is HCLD by saying that they do not do semen analyses and they don't count. And therefore they save money by not having a PhD in that position or someone else that meets the requirement of an HCLD. I think at the very minimum, though, if you are charging a CPT code that includes those for semen analysis, then for sure you are doing a diagnostic test.
Thank you so much. One more question. We're gonna try to go through all the questions so everybody get answered, and also we have all of you answer the question. The second one is about stamped signature. So are they acceptable for inspection from a lab director? And I can take anyone who wanted to answer this.
I can start. It's tough to get physician signatures on stuff. You use stamped physician signatures. However, if you have a signature line for anything, for a report, for a printout. If you have a signature line, someone's got to sign it. We've never gotten dinged for having stamped physician stuff, but I sign everything that comes out of the endocrine machine. The tech signs for semen analysis, those types of things, as well as the physician for that patient. So again, if you have a signature line, make sure there's a signature there. I don't know if you can get away with not having signatures on certain things, but most stuff needs some type of signature besides the tech's initials or something along those lines. Kim, you may know more about it than I do on that one.
Yeah, anyone wanted to comment on stamped signature?
I think I would say that there are some times when you can get away with just typing in your initials. And I think it's become rather common for people to consider that as a signature. I would much rather type my initials into that I've okayed this protocol with the date. Then someone can ask me, did you type it in? And I can say yes. But signature could be duplicated and imitated just as much as typing in initials can. And because I do a lot of off-site stuff, or I do some off-site work, then it makes it easier for me when I can go ahead and just type an initial, and I've never been dinged on it yet.
Fantastic. One more question came into the chat saying how one can become an inspector, a CAP inspector. There is no bar exam.
You're
or
laughing
like that,
too,
right?
Tony. Everyone is.
Well, all you got to do is go to CAP. They'll be happy to have you do inspections. Go to cap.org and sign up. They'll have you go all over the world to do them. I personally don't like it because none of it, you're not paid. I think everybody in the office here thinks I'm paid. I figure I spend about a month a year either getting inspected or doing inspections, by all in all. And that's just time I can never get back. So, but they're happy to take you. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah, they have online training that you can take.
Yeah, and sometimes when you get inspected, they may offer you to become an inspector. It did happen to us one time. They come and they inspect you. They like the way you work. They say, this guy may be a good inspector because they have no deficiency or whatever that reason is. Okay, so I looked at your guys' presentation, and each one really had different approach. Kim says, put them in a cage, don't make them too comfortable. Give them little by little, don't give them too many things to look at. Bill say, hey, be cool, don't worry, it's gonna be fine. They're there to help you, you're gonna help them, and it's a virtually a mutual learning. But there is always a risk, right? There is a risk that if you get an inspector that likes to dig too much, you may get cited, and that citation may be sometimes okay, maybe sometimes can lead to a big problem. And how do you guys see that? So there is obviously a risk associated if your lab is not well. Why do we have diverse opinion in this panel as far as how do you guys see inspection?
I personally look at it like an onion. If you find some things on the outer layer that are problematic, then you need to dig deeper, like the layers of the onion. If you find that things look good on the outside, you probably don't have to dig too deep. But once you find something, you can dig, and so when you, like Kim says, if you give information what they ask for just specifically, you can have some inspectors that are bullies, and I'm not just specifically CAP. I've had bully FDA inspectors. One day I had a doctor's appointment I had to go to, and the FDA just shows up anytime they want. Well, while I was gone at the FDA, by the time I came back, there's people in a room trying to write protocols for something that we already had. And I showed it to them, and they're like, well, this isn't sufficient. And I said, yes, it is. It's exactly what we need. So sometimes you just kind of hold your ground and know that, some inspectors can be a bit of a bully. And if you know the regulations and you've been through multiple inspections, that's one of the things CAP doesn't teach you. Like, it'll tell you how to cite a deficiency, but it doesn't tell you what a good quality management program is. So you have to know that before you can go do inspections.
Kind of just add to that. Great point, Tony. Again, if you have it and you're doing what's in that checklist, keep it, even if you do more or beyond what's on that checklist, just put it in that I do this minimum or at least this. That covers that checklist question. So let's just say you measure tanks every day. But the requirement is 3 times a week, I believe. So you want to put in your policies and procedures, hey, we monitor our tanks at least 3 times a week, even if you do it 5. Just so they can't ding. If you miss a day for some reason, you're short-staffed and someone forgot to do it or whatever, you have that you do it at least the bare minimum times that they're expecting you to do. So things like that. Just again, if you add too much, they're going to find stuff to ding you on. Again, if you don't sign every piece of paper that has a signature line on it, they're going to ding you. They're going to find stuff to ding you on. And you're right, there is definitely bullies out there. There's people that are looking for stuff, and there's people that are in it to come to San Diego and enjoy the weather also. So, it depends on who you get and what you're getting out of it. And Kim is definitely right about, and Tony, you alluded to it too, just, feed them what they want, don't give them too much. That is great. I'm all for that. And that's what I mean is keeping it as simple as possible. Don't give them too much unless they ask. But I try to keep it as simple as possible.
Okay, so when we look at IVF labs, so you have the small labs that are within dozens of employees with very little resources. Then you have middle size, and then you have very large labs that have virtually, almost 100 or more employees. Obviously, some have more resources than others. What would be your advice to those labs that don't have lots of resources? How they can cope up with their daily work and at the same time get prepared for this kind of inspection? And I'll give the word to Kim and maybe BK after that.
Well, it's kind of like tough luck. You've got to do what they require. And I think what that means is you've got to go to your owners. And if you don't have enough people there to do it, maybe you need to hire someone from high school to do some of the clerical work that leaves you more time free to do the work that matters, which is the regulatory work and the actual work there. But, you're stuck with it. They're requirements. You've got to get it done. And I think too often owners don't put enough emphasis on the importance of this, that you could be potentially shut down. On the other hand, as I've seen what CAT does, I don't know of any cases where they've shut down a clinic. And I know some cases that performed poorly and they're still left running. So I don't think CAP has a lot of teeth. They're mainly there as someone to help you, and that's how it should be. And frankly, for CAP, very seldom do I set it up like my jail and a shark, because I know the people that are coming to visit me and I know how they are. But I set it up that way initially because I don't know who's coming. And one time I had 2 people that came to inspect a clinic that did a total of 25 IVF retrieval cycles that year. And they were there for over a day and a half and found tons and tons of deficiencies that were, for me, stretching it. But I don't mind that because you just write a letter and put it in the packet on your response to those deficiencies, and they'll get taken care of correctly.
Yeah.
I have a lot of faith in Erica Benke and her staff, but mainly in Erica Benke. She's very fair.
BK?
Exactly.
Oh, your voice is
I
gone.
think what I have seen it personally is that smaller programs, especially some of them have a single embryologist or a single person, staff in the lab that performs everything, whether it is embryology procedures or embryology procedures. Personally find it very difficult. I personally think that there should not be any lab with a single person. There has to be a backup as far as lab staff is concerned. Never have only one person and for her for any patient care. So we have seen the same thing. A lot of issues.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not able to hear you, BK. I'm very, very sorry. Okay, so I think, sorry for interrupting you, BK, but voice is completely gone. Hopefully we can fix this in the next webinar. We are approaching the end of the webinar. I have one more question. So regarding the resources, obviously there are, small labs can go to consultants, and there are some consultants that will help you get prepared. I remember in the days I have hired consultants in the past. And I know you, for example, Tony, you do help some of the labs get ready for CAP, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, especially some of these labs that are small and don't have a lot of resources. I can help people get ready, and I think how Bill said, you can either have someone come in and do like an external audit to help you through it, and it's more of a, I'm here to help you. And I will go through the CAP checklist and say, here's these things, you should get ready for this, look at this. And also people that I've started with labs that are just starting up, and help them get ready for either CLIA, Joint Commission, or CAP, all of those. And so I've actually done that as part of the services through my consulting company.
Thank you so much. Bill, do you support this kind of applications when it comes to CAP inspect? You guys are not into that, right? Supporting labs that supporting.
Yeah, not at this point in time. We, again, I in my presentation, when we first started out, I used consultants to help me through. I don't anymore. I mean, we've been through so many. If someone needed help, I would certainly be available outside, but we're not needing the help. But I would always offer it to, again, as Tony said, these smaller labs, they don't have one, they probably don't have the personnel to do it, because they're trying to make a little bit when they're starting out, try to get some kind of revenue going. So they're out there, Tony being one, that's for sure, and I'm sure anyone on this panel would be available to do that.
Very good. Okay, well, we are approaching the end of the webinar. I'm gonna let you guys introduce your interests or your organization for a minute, and then we're gonna proceed with closing the webinar. And I'll start with you, maybe Tony first.
Yes, I actually, for the past 13 years, I've been an officer or a full-time lab director at, started out as RMA of Texas and now in the Prelude Network. I'm actually leaving Prelude to do full-time with my training lab and consulting. And so that's going to be my bread and butter going forward. Or to train embryologists, andrologists, very much like the West group out in San Diego.
Congratulations. Kim?
Yes, I'm the science director for the World Egg Bank. Although that takes up almost all of my time, some people think all I do is go on vacations, but I don't. I work a lot from my home, and I have to travel a lot throughout the world. But I also am off-site director at 2 places. I'm not looking for any more off-site directors. I like to have no off-site directing, but it takes a lot of my time, and it keeps me on my toes too, especially because both of these places are owned by friends and have small labs of only one embryologist. And I remember, most of us remember doing that for a good part of the beginning of our lives. So I like to help out those sort of people.
Thank you so much. BK?
Well, I have been the lab director here in Orlando at Center for about 100 cases a year, about now 600. Orlando, Florida.
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much. And Bill?
I've been with San Diego Fertility Center since '99. And that's when we went private and moved out of the hospital setting. So I've been with these, the founding physicians since '94. We've grown immensely from being a boutique clinic to pretty much international. And it's been a great ride so far. And Tony, I'm glad to hear you're going to put more of your time and effort into training. We need a lot of embryologists these days, and it's great to hear that you're doing the longer course, and get these. There probably should be regional training centers all over our country. We need them desperately. So good stuff.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, I'm glad to see more training programs. I think that's going to benefit a lot of people who don't have those resources, and I definitely see value in that. Now, looking at the poll results, we asked the audience, did you find this webinar to be useful? 86% said yes. Would you like to see webinars like this in the future? 90% said yes. This is definitely the fruit of your contribution. I want to extend my appreciation to each one of you for your inputs and your experience. With this, we are going to be coming to the end of the webinar. Next week, we will next 2 weeks, we will have another webinar. This time it's going to be on managing IVF laboratory personnel, including training, competency, assessment, and retention. All these aspects will going to be discussed Wednesday, June the 9th at 3 p.m. Pacific time. So with this, we're coming to the end of the webinar. Thank you so much, and I will see you in 2 weeks.